So you just heard two senators questioning two different people. You heard first from Ted Olson being questioned, the former Solicitor General who lost his wife in 9/11 when she was on one of the planes, I believe, that crashed into the Pentagon. And then you're out with Senator Blumenthal and Senator Booker going on. Now, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's going on with our guest, Aitan Goelman. Aitan, hello, how are you?
I'm good.
And did I pronounce your name correctly?
Both first and last name. Very impressive.
So you have a lot of experience, right? You have been the youngest trial member of the case with Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, in the federal government. So tell us exactly why are they talking about this Garza case?
I think it is an effort to paint Judge Kavanaugh as outside of the mainstream American legal and political opinion on abortion, and to raise the specter that the precedent of Roe versus Wade would be endangered if Judge Kavanaugh is elevated to the Supreme Court.
Well, let me ask you this. I looked this morning, and apparently the polls say most of the Americans are in favor of abortion. So how could he be out of the mainstream if he is against abortion?
I'm sorry, most Americans
are in favor of it.
Are in favor of abortion?
That's what I read this morning on one of the Gallup polls taken.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think in the Garza case, he wrote an opinion that did not allow this minor to get an abortion. So if the majority of the country is pro-choice, you could view that opinion as an anti-choice opinion.
Right. Now, we'll talk about a little bit Garza. Garza allows what's called a judicial bypass. That means if the parents aren't available, the court can give permission. That's all it means. A lot of technical terms in the law. But we're going to break it down. We're going to continue on. Stay with us. We're going to be on break for a very short time, and hopefully we'll see Senator Booker. That's Senator Hirono from Hawaii. She is questioning members of the panel. We heard from Professor Melissa Murray. We heard from an advocacy specialist whose name was Elizabeth Weintraub. These are people, they're not senators. Most of them did not go to Yale. Obviously, if you see normal people working at their jobs. So I'd like to bring my guest in, if we could, Aitan Goelman. Aitan? Let me just ask you this. There are three issues that the Democrats were talking about. They were talking about racial profiling, Roe versus Wade, and a disconnect with the public versus for the Republicans who talk about temperament. So what do you have to look for in a Supreme Court nominee such as Kavanaugh? Temperament or his views on specific issues?
I think that if the Senate was doing its traditional job, it would be looking at whether or not any particular nominee is qualified, open-minded, and independent enough to serve on the Supreme Court. I think that, recent decades, the way it's played out is the court has been used as kind of a hot-button issue to rally the base of both parties. And so any nominee is going to be asked about, particular issues in the culture wars by the other side, less likely to affect the vote, because it's pretty clear that Judge Kavanaugh will be confirmed, as much as to play to that party's base. It's unfortunate.
Yeah, so Aitan, you're kind of breaking up on us, but let's think about this. Let's ask our people in our chat room, people to tweet to us. What do you think? Is it temperament, or is it their view on cases? Is it temperament, or is it racial profiling? Is it temperament, or is it Roe versus Wade? Is it temperament, or is it something else? What do you think? Because you're the people, the public, that's going to be affected by this nomination. Not so much the senators, not so much me, but the public, you. So while they're on lunch break, and they will be very prompt, we're going to our top crime story of the day, because here at Law and Crime, we do more than just one thing at a time.
Here are today's top crime stories trending on lawandcrime.com and across the country. A Chinese billionaire is facing charges in Minneapolis after being arrested on suspicion of criminal sexual misconduct. 45-year-old Liu Kwang-dong, who also goes by Richard Liu, was arrested and released from the Hennepin County Jail pending possible criminal charges. Liu, the founder of Chinese e-commerce website JD.com, faced previous accusations of sexual assault after a 2015 incident in Australia, which ultimately resulted in no charges being filed. Liu and JD.com claim he was falsely accused and will take the necessary legal action against false reporting or rumors. A man suspected of stealing from a farm in Maine Prairie Township, Minnesota, was apprehended after his getaway vehicle pooped out and got stuck in a pile of manure. 29-year-old Matthew Blomquist was arrested after he allegedly snatched lumber and other items before getting stuck in the waist-deep manure. Officers reportedly found Blomquist standing on the side of the road covered in manure and smoking a cigarette. Blomquist now faces charges of burglary and possession of stolen property, as well as a much-needed shower. Authorities in Texas have released the identity of a woman caught on camera crashing her car in a high-speed chase with police with her infant child in the back seat. Caitlin Rodriguez was arrested after she led police on a high-speed chase in San Antonio, crashed her vehicle, and tried to carjack another car while carrying her baby. The chase and crash was captured by police helicopter camera.
She's in the back seat. She's got the baby and we're running. We're running southbound from the accident.
Rodriguez now faces charges of child endangerment, possession of a controlled substance, and evading arrest. Those were today's top crime stories. I'm Anthony Velez for Law & Crime.
So we're back to the top crime stories. As you see, things happen that you cannot believe your eyes every single day, but stay tuned with Law & Crime, we'll tell you. So while we're in a break from the hearing, I want to go to Aitan for just a second. Aitan, I want you to think about a couple things that we'll talk about later on when we have a little more time. There was a lot of testimony yesterday about something called constitutional textualism, strict constructionism, originalism, okay? What the heck do those mean, and what the heck do they have to do with the public? Don't answer now, because I know that's like a law school question. And the second thing is, I want to ask you whether you agree with what we're going to hear next about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg and whether or not she's an embarrassment or anything like that, or is she a heroine? So think about those questions. We're going to listen to certain testimony from yesterday, Senator Kamala Harris, Senator Richard Blumenthal. Let's see what comes up next. We're back, and you just heard Senator Blumenthal questioning Judge Kavanaugh about tweets from Donald Trump about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, that she has, quote, embarrassed us all, close quote, quote, her mind is shot, close quote. And Blumenthal wanted to know what the nominee thought about those tweets and thought about whether or not Ruth Bader Ginsburg's mind is shot. So Aitan, you have practiced in the federal courts. Judge Kavanaugh didn't answer that question. Why not?
I think that Judge Kavanaugh, and I know him not well, but I've appeared in front of him, probably shares the view that those tweets were outrageous and offensive and way below the dignity of the office. He did not directly answer them. I think that the answer that he gave was a way of indirectly criticizing the president. And, I think it's fair to say that one would have hoped he would be more direct in rebuking the president. I will note that, Justice Gorsuch, when he criticized the president for attacking the judiciary branch, later Trump apparently was so angry at that display of disloyalty that he thought about withdrawing.
But let me stop you right there. Isn't that the issue? If we're talking about a Supreme Court justice that should be loyalty should be to us, to the people, to the Constitution, shouldn't he have said, if he believed they were terrible, hey, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is great. I think she's great. I mean, I just want to do planks like her. Forget her opinions, So why loyalty versus disloyalty?
Oh, I agree. I think he should have been stronger about that. Again, in Judge Kavanaugh's defense, I think that were he to be withdrawn as a nominee by President Trump, who knows who we'd get instead of Judge Kavanaugh. It's hard to see.
Okay, I got it.
Trump someone better.
I got it. So the issue that Aitan's saying, that we may get somebody worse who's more loyal to views that the rest of us don't hold if Judge Kavanaugh had given an answer and Trump decided to go after him like he almost did Gorsuch. So we're going to come back after the break. We have a lot more to talk about. Stay tuned. So that was Senator Kamala Harris going back to a subject she was on for 2 days. Did Judge Kavanaugh have any conversation about the Mueller investigation with anyone from the firm representing President Trump? And then you saw what it's like to be a good lawyer. Now remember, at least 16 of the members of this committee are lawyers, and they participate in cross-examination, and that's what she's trying to do. And you saw a witness, so to speak. Let's say he wasn't the witness for the Supreme Court, kind of like hedge, and then finally give the answer no. So we finally got the answer no. But does it matter? I don't know. Aitan, are you still here? Yes.
I'm with you.
You're not leaving me, and you can hear everything right now. So why is it so important that this question be asked and answered?
I don't know, actually. I don't know what
Okay.
Senator Harris
Honest.
has.
This is an honest witness I have here, right? Good point.
I mean, does she have? I believe Senator Harris has information that Judge Kavanaugh had a conversation about something related to Mueller with somebody who worked at Kasowitz. But Kasowitz, I don't know, has 100 lawyers at their firm. If this is a conversation the way people all over the country are having a conversation about Mueller and Trump, it's not necessarily anything wrong. If she has evidence that he discussed this in a way that would have somehow prejudiced or predicted what his eventual position on the special counsel's investigation would have been, I'm not sure why she's withholding that.
Well,
I think,
shouldn't she then tell us, if we want that answer from him, should she tell us who her, quote, snitch is, or her reliable information, or her third information?
Or if not who her snitch is, at least who he was supposed to have this conversation with and what it was. I mean, this is a time when people are supposed to know everything about Judge Kavanaugh that they need to vote. So there doesn't seem to be much point in playing coy.
Well, the American people maybe want to know whether he has a position on Mueller, right? Right? Just like any other thing that we want to know. We're the ones who get affected by the decisions.
Right, but I think there's a difference. It just goes back to what you were talking about before about temperament versus view on specific cases. There's a difference between getting a potential justice's view on general judicial philosophy, right? Originalism versus contextualism, and saying, okay.
Well, we haven't talked about what that means yet, so keep it simple for those of us who are watching who don't know.
All I'm saying is there's a difference between that discussion, which I think is appropriate and necessary, and one that says, okay, if this case came up to you, how would you vote?
Okay, so we have the Democrats who have been cross-examining a little bit more than I'd say the Republicans are cross-examining Judge Kavanaugh. We're going to listen to Senator Cory Booker, who was from my home state, New Jersey, and he's been pretty passionate on one thing, racial profiling and race. We're going to listen to what he talks about, then hopefully we'll come back and talk about it, because I do think that he has missed one thing, and that's not just race, but it's the criminal law, the death penalty. Where does Judge Kavanaugh stand there? Where does Judge Kavanaugh stand on the things that affect us as Americans? That was Senator Cory Booker. Now, let's set this up. There was a number of emails that were labeled committee confidential, which means only the committee could see them. The public couldn't see them. They couldn't even be referred to. At the time Senator Booker discussed this email and said he was going to release it, it was still private, and he was still subject to something. We don't know what, because there is no Senate rule saying you can't release it. It's a chairman's rule. But he was saying he could be subject to expulsion. Ultimately, what he did lead to a 3:15 in the morning release of the emails so we all could read them. And one of them that he's talking about is one with racial profiling, which uses the word naked racial set-aside, and also discusses whether or not you can sue the government if a government is deliberately indifferent if you have private officers standing in public officers' stead, which that means if it's a private company who's enforcing the laws, being the police of a town, can you sue them if they're deliberately indifferent, and what does that mean? To break this down, we have Aitan Goelman. Aitan, what is deliberate indifference?
You had my name right at the beginning, and you've been backsliding. It's Aitan Goelman. I was so impressed initially.
About what? What were you impressed about?
By my name, your pronunciation of my name.
Did I get it right?
Aitan Goelman, yeah.
That's what I thought, Aitan Goelman, right? So let's go to the important things. Let's go to the Supreme Court nominee, Brett Kavanaugh. I've got that one right, too. Okay,
yes, you
so let's go to what I asked you. Why was this important?
Well, I mean, there's two reasons, right? One is the substance and the issue of racial preference and how and when that's going to come before the Supreme Court again is a real issue. But the other issue is what criteria are the committee using in order to label these documents committee confidential? It doesn't seem like there's any real principled reason to label this particular set of documents confidential. So I think Senator Booker was right in saying that these should be released. I think it was a little bit.
I've got to cut you off. I've got to cut you off because we're going to go to a break. Stay with us.
Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry, not yet. Okay, 90 seconds, not 9 seconds. So I'm not going to cut you off. So you said there's two issues then. There's two issues then. The first one is that why were these documents labeled that way? Okay, so now we know they're not. We don't know what else was labeled that way. The second issue is the substance. Deliberate indifference is what under the law?
Deliberate indifference is knowing that there is a high probability of something occurring, and it's basically like willful blindness. It's basically the ostrich who intentionally avoids knowing. So
in Chicago, for instance, if all these cops for years have been setting people up and having wrongful convictions, he would indicate, it seemed to me, that if that job was being done by a private police department, you couldn't sue, correct?
That seems to be the implication, yeah.
That would be. And that would then lessen the public's rights to sue for some type of wrongful treatment by the police, even though the police are private. Why shouldn't we have that information to begin with? Why was that labeled confidential?
I don't know. Actually, there doesn't seem to be a great rationale for not releasing that to the public. Okay. I mean,
so now, Aitan, we're going to go to break. When you come back, I still want to ask you about textualism. Textualism, okay. What is that? Okay. We're going to switch topics just for a minute. We're going to go to George Papadopoulos. I don't know if you remember him, but he was one of the first people arrested when Mueller was investigating the Russian connection. Papadopoulos was labeled by the Trump organization as a coffee boy. He was labeled by the Mueller, apparently, as somebody who was initiating a spy contact with Russia and trying to set up a meeting with Trump and Vladimir Putin. And then he got arrested, and then he's going to get sentenced today. But while he's out on sentence, he hasn't had an ankle monitor, or he hasn't been under house arrest, nothing. So I'm going to bring our specialist in this, Aitan Goelman, in, who was a DOJ. He was at the DOJ and prosecuted Timothy McVeigh. He was in the Southern District. Aitan, what does it mean to you if the judge didn't put him under house arrest or an ankle bracelet or anything during this time? Well, while he's out there, he's gotten married. His wife and he want to sell a book for $1 million about their life. They're dancing in the hallways. Do you tempt fate when you start doing that before you're sentenced?
Yeah, I think you can definitely create an impression that won't be helpful at sentencing. You know, you want to go in and say that you're contrite, and Mr. Papadopoulos apparently is a cooperator, so the government is going to ask for the court to give him a break for that reason.
Well, let's watch them. Let's watch them get married. Let's watch a happy time. Let's watch them get married while he's out waiting sentence.
So it is with that honor, having shown your willingness to become husband and wife by the power vested in me by the Constitution, the statutes of the state of Illinois, I now pronounce you husband and wife. May your lives together be long and happy. With all best wishes, I congratulate you. I wish you good luck and all the blessings your hearts may hold. Sir, you may kiss your bride.
Thank you so much. Beautiful.
You see that Law&Crime, Brian Ross investigates. We have it. They're married. And then what does this mean? Well, can he now go before the judge, Aitan? Can he go before the judge and say, look, I've got such a wonderful life right now. I'm not sorry for what I did, but it's a wonderful life. Why put me in jail? Can he do that? Will it be successful?
Look, I mean, you could say, hey, you know, locking me up will also hurt innocent people, my wife, my kid. I think I have to disagree with you about that video. I didn't find it offensive, and I don't know if as a judge I'd find it offensive. I mean, if you had the guy, you know, raucously misbehaving at a strip bar or something like that, that'd be one thing. But here, I mean, it's kind of heartwarming.
So let's add to that. Let's assume after they're getting married, they're telling people they're going to sell their rights to a book for $1 million. Does that offend the judge?
that is not so helpful.
Okay. And should it have anything to do with it? Is there there's a sentencing guidelines. Does selling a book beforehand mean you get more time, or you wouldn't have gotten any time beforehand? Is there something that says, okay, we're going to increase your sentence because of that, or does it go to whether or not you're sorry for what you did?
Yeah, no, there's nothing under the sentencing guidelines to say you add 2 points because someone's trying to profit from their crime. But definitely, it's something that could be considered under the sentencing factors under the statute.
What would you, who's experienced, give him as a sentence if you were this judge?
I don't have enough information.
Oh my God, we're taking the fifth. We're taking the Brett Kavanaugh view that with Kamala Harris that they thought you don't have enough information. You're not going to talk about it. All right. So anyhow, so the public knows there are sentencing guidelines in the federal court that the judges used to have to adhere to. Now they use them as a guideline. His guideline, I believe, is set for the prosecution says for about 6 months. We don't know whether he's going to get that or not, but it's not a very long time. We'll be talking about it more when we come back. Stay tuned, taking this break. Aitan Goelman, this is the federal public defender. His name is Mr. A.J. Kramer. He's been there since 1991, and he says that the nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, sounds terrific on criminal cases, had a dissent in a battered women's syndrome, basically, had a concurrence in one about mens rea, that he wasn't anti-defendant. What does that mean in terms of whether or not he will change the law in terms of criminal convictions or wrongful convictions? Can we get any read about how he will deal with wrongful convictions and the death penalty from these two cases?
Yeah, I think that AJ's testimony is frankly pretty consistent with what anybody who's appeared in front of Judge Kavanaugh while he was on the D.C. Circuit. I mean, I had a case as a criminal defense attorney in front of him. He and Judge Edwards, who's a very liberal judge, were both on my side, and we ended up getting a new trial for the defendant. Judge Kavanaugh is not the threat to civil liberties that he is being portrayed as. And I don't think you find any lawyer who appeared in front of him.
Aren't there different kinds of civil liberties here? We're talking about the criminal justice system, which he seems to be pretty attuned to. There are, by the way, since 1989, there's been almost 2,300 exonerations, many of them death penalty exonerations in the system. Do you think do you know if he's ever given a hint at how he'll react about those cases that come before him?
Actual innocence in the death penalty?
Right, yes.
I don't know of any opinions, but all you can do is go from someone's record, and he has always been kind of fair-minded and able to follow the law in his cases. I believe that, and you can argue, you can definitely say Garza was wrongly decided.
How about, let me ask you this, how about in race cases? How about sentencing in race cases? Anything that would give pause to people? Like Cory Booker was really into discussing his issues of race and whether or not he's a racist, basically, in some way or manner. How about in criminal law and race cases? Anything that you know of?
I don't know of anything, and I have not heard anybody who appeared in front of Judge Kavanaugh, who knows Judge Kavanaugh on the right and the left, ever suggest that he was actually a racist. That would be shocking to me.
Okay. How about in terms of opinions, whether or not he'll give deference to whether somebody was treated unfairly by a jury because of their race? And anything you know about that? I mean, these are the questions I kind of wanted to ask. I don't know about you. How about you? Same questions?
There are certain questions that I think are likely to come up before the Supreme Court in terms of, I don't know, Batson challenges, right? If there's like
That's a jury challenge, by the way, for everyone watching, on the basis of race or protected class.
Right. And I'm not aware of any kind of unsettled, I guess you could question whether or not Batson will be extended to additional classes, right? Whether sexual orientation or something like that. But I have not heard anything that suggests that he is likely to somehow roll back the idea that juries, especially in death penalty cases, have to be, vetted more carefully in terms of, any kind of racial bias or commitment.
I gotcha. That's good to hear. So we're going to go right back into the hearing because I know that one of the Parkland survivors is going to testify. Let's see if she's ready to talk. You just heard from a Parkland shooting survivor, a young woman named Ailey Eastman. I don't know about you, but Aitan Goelman and I were here, and I don't know about the viewers weigh in on the chat room, but I had tears in my eyes when she said she prayed to God that a bullet would go through her head. She also said the police plucked body matter from her hair, and by 9:30 when she finally saw her mother, she was just a wreck. Now, Aitan Goelman, how does that affect the senators in any way, whether you're for gun control, against gun control? Does it give everybody pause to hear this young woman's story?
It should. I mean, senator or not senator, I don't see how you as a human being can listen to that narrative and, not have your heart in your throat at the end of it, especially if you have kids.
And she also mentioned the fact that it appeared that Judge Brett Kavanaugh would not shake hands with Fred Guttenberg, who was the father of Jamie Guttenberg, who was killed in Parkland. Now, if I were Judge Kavanaugh's handler, I would have him have breakfast or lunch with him the next day to say that was just a mistake, that wasn't meant, maybe I didn't know. What about you? How would you handle that differently? Because this is a presser, isn't it? It's to get people to like Kavanaugh.
Yeah, I mean, of all the things that I've read about the hearing, that was the most puzzling to me. To not shake that guy's hand, I mean, it's just rude. I mean, and I don't believe, well, I can't believe that was Brett's intention. It just doesn't seem like him. I mean, even if you completely disagree with his judicial philosophy and his politics, nobody thinks he's a, impolite guy.
I'm going to put you on the spot because you've met him a couple of times. You've shaken hands with Judge Kavanaugh. Have you ever talked to him about gun control?
No.
All right. Do you know what his issues are about gun control? Do you know whether he's for it or against it?
I don't know what his interpretation of the Second Amendment is. I mean, I find it difficult to believe that any reasonable person can think that, that Second Amendment guarantees people the right to carry assault weapons. AK-47s were not invented in 1789.
Okay, so that's one of the things when we come back with you. Eventually today we'll talk about textualism, but we're going to go back into the hearing now and see the other members of the panel testify. We're back at Law and Crime, and I hope you digested 13-year-old Jackson Corbin, because I want to talk to Aitan Goelman, our guest, about him. Aitan, this child has been through a lot, obviously. His family has this genetic disease. He showed great poise talking to the Senate. I'm not sure at 13 I could have done that, just like the other young woman from Parkland, and talking about pre-existing conditions and his need for health insurance. Now, let me ask you a question. Judge Kavanaugh said he was a textualist. So how does Judge Kavanaugh interpret the Constitution when the issue before him may be, do you cover pre-existing conditions under insurance plans or do you not?
Yeah. Well, a textualist means somebody who looks at the original text of the Constitution and doesn't, as opposed to different kind of originalists, try to kind of psychoanalyze the framers' intent, in 1789.
Well, in 1789, I'm sure they didn't have the notification of genetic disease, and they didn't have insurance, they didn't have the issue of pre-existing conditions. So what does somebody who says, I'm a textualist, do when you're confronted with this young kid, Jackson Corbin, who really broke my heart?
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's a couple kind of universes away from the actual language of the Constitution at that point, right? I mean, then you're trying to talk about, what the federal government can force states to do, what they can, and the, individual mandate and that kind of stuff. I mean, what this kid did is he really put a human face on the issues, right? It's not about some kind of intellectual or legal,
right.
How many angels can dance on the head of a pin. I mean, these are real human beings that are impacted.
Well, how about his law clerk? The woman who talked before said he had 4 law clerks 1 year. Great, that's fabulous. But isn't one of the issues Roe versus Wade and, these issues that affect people instead of all the gobbledygook that we heard with questioning? I mean, shouldn't they be talking about people like Jackson Corbin more when you're discussing a Supreme Court nominee than whether or not you're originalist or textualist or whether or not strict constructionist or, all that stuff that people don't care about?
I think that, having these kids come there and testify does really kind of put a human face on these issues so that you realize that there are actual human beings who are going to be, who are incredibly impacted by Supreme Court decisions. I don't know that that means that, his former clerks and people who can testify about his character shouldn't be heard. I think that's relevant too.
One of the people that were missing testifying is a young man named Hunter LaChance from Maine who has asthma, and he's talking about, to our viewers who are missing, because you and I are speaking, about the fact that Kavanaugh, one of his opinions was very against air control standards, and that asthmatics, when they have these warnings, go into coughing fits, they can't breathe, and it's very serious. And so, again, these are opinions that affect people like Hunter LaChance. Now, do you think Judge Kavanaugh, being this textualist, takes this into account?
Yeah, I think Judge Kavanaugh understands that his opinions can affect the lives of millions of human beings. I do. I think that, you know, he tries to decide things in fidelity with, you know, the law, precedent, and his judicial philosophy, but you know, it doesn't hurt for him and any other judge or justice to be reminded of the actual impact that their decisions have.
Why wouldn't he answer Kamala Harris's question about whether or not he still thinks that equal marriage is the law of the land, or the other questions about whether he would support Roe versus Wade? Why won't he answer these questions directly about what his views are, so the people that have these conditions can say, yeah, I want to support this guy, or I don't want to support this guy?
I think that's the playbook since Bork, since that nomination failed, right? You evade answering any direct question about something that could conceivably come before the court.
Well, yeah, but that's is that a ridiculous standard anymore? That because everything can come, we know everything can come before the court, and we know these are the issues that are going to come before the court. So shouldn't he at least tell us how he feels personally, even if he doesn't rule that way? Because I think he only said one opinion. He said 4 opinions of Preston, but only one opinion was not being overruled. That was Brown versus Board of Education. That was an opinion with Judge Earl Warren, where the majority all agreed that separate is not equal in race. But he then made a distinction about precedent, that almost any opinion can be overruled because precedent is not necessarily the law of the land. That's what I was reading into what he was saying. How about you?
Well, I mean, precedent is binding on everybody except the Supreme Court, right?
Right.
They can change things. They can overrule precedent.
Right.
So that's right. But I think I agree. I think it's in a lot of ways unfortunate. But you know, how many justices have been nominated and confirmed since Bork? 6, 7, and that's the playbook now. That's how you get confirmed.
Okay, so now we know that it's the playbook. We're going to go back into the hearing. We're going to see who else is testifying for or against Judge Kavanaugh becoming Justice Kavanaugh. I'd like to bring Aitan Goelman in. Aitan, you were a former prosecutor, a federal prosecutor in the Southern District, then at the DOJ. I'm going to ask you quickly a question. Would you confirm Kavanaugh, yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, second question I'm going to ask you. Do you think he will be confirmed, yes or no?
Yes.
Third question. Do you think he's going to be the vote to overrule Roe versus Wade?
No.
Do you think he's going to overrule marriage equality?
No.
How about health care rights, pre-existing conditions?
I don't know enough about
okay, on that, we're going to let you go. Thank you, Aitan. It's been a pleasure. I hope to see you back next time I'm on the air. We're going to go to break very soon. I want you to stay with us. Law and Crime, we've got all the stories.